I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Michael Janssen, Chief Research Officer, guides the practices research agenda and architecture by leveraging his extensive experience to identify and unlock emerging trends. Akshat Vaid, Vice President, leads engineering services research and advisory at Everest Group. He assists global enterprises on a variety of initiatives across engineering, technology, outsourcing, and ecosystem engagement. Mayank Maria, Practice Director, is a member of the engineering services team and assists clients on topics relating to engineering, spending, and outsourcing across key verticals, including automotive, high-tech, industrial, and medical devices. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Michael.
Hello, thanks for joining. And today's topic is a little bit different than our traditional outsourcing on IT, finance, HR, all those nice core G&A topics. We're going to be talking about an engineering service. We're going to be talking about Industry 4.0 and the landscape that our team sees. So we're going to talk a lot about, got to have a lot of data. We'll have some definitions. We'll talk about the journey that enterprises are going on. But let's get started. And we start with a kind of a big picture view here. The dialogue really kind of takes, kind of 100-year swaths of time here, as you see on the picture there. Big macro, 18th century was the mechanization 2.0 and 19th century, 20th century. But those are all big 100-year swaths. Some of us have lived maybe that industry 3.0 if you're depending on your age. But the really cool thing is now that industry 4.0. And so Akshat, why don't you give us your perspective on the dimensions here and get us started on this pretty interesting topic.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So if you want to understand Industry 4.0, I think it's a good thing to kind of look back over all these centuries of evolution. So we started with Industry 1.0, right? This was the first time we actually had an industrial setup going for us. The keyword here was steam, steam power, steam engines. This was the first time production got mechanized, and that was because of steam power, right? As time went by, Industry 2.0, the second phase came along. This was around discovery of electricity, and this was a big leap, right? For the first time, we could have electrical power driving things. So discovery of electricity, assembly line production, first used for automobile production. So all cool new things. Essentially, this brought in huge speed and even cost savings as well. The Industry 3.0 transformation, which again took a year in coming. This was around partial automation too. So industrial setups and manufacturing, they got automated and human intervention got lower. Using memory, programmable controls and computers, what that did was, human intervention got lowered. Many of the functions and setups, they got automated to a great extent. Robots are a great example of this. That brings us to Industry 4.0 now, right? So that phase of partial automation, lower human intervention, that's been there for the longest period of time. But with whatever we've been able to achieve as a civilization, this is the next new phase. So interconnectivity, digitization, true automation, which actually spreads across processes, operations, even things and equipments and people, right? All of this is what Industry 4.0 brings under it. It's an umbrella term, of course. It cuts across a variety of technologies and value chain. If I were to define it, I would say, it focuses on digitization of operational technology and its convergence with IT. And this is done to achieve operational excellence and drive significant value. It's truly a merger of the physical and virtual world. So that's how we kind of look at the Industry 4.0 space. Now, before we go ahead, why don't we start with a quick poll and kind of get the conversation going. Let me turn this over to Michael.
Yeah, before we turn to that quick poll there, Akshat, I thought you were going to say that the real-time period relevancy was like pre-internet and post-internet, and I'm sure, I grew up in the pre-internet, and Akshat and Mayank, I bet you guys don't even know what pre-internet looks like. So it was a whole different world. Anyway, as we move into the industrial side of this thing, what we want to do is start with that quick poll. in terms of how important do you think Industry 4.0 is to your business? And so we've got a spectrum of answers here. So without it, we aren't in business would be one level, all the way through we haven't assessed and aren't aware of the business case as yet. And so this will have probably some bearing on the industry that you're in. But as Akshat and Mayank are going to show later, that this really is impacting most industries, or if not all industries. Okay, we'll give it another 3 seconds, and then I'll ask to close the poll and show the results there. All right, so it looks like we got a pretty heavy weighting to it toward it. It's really an important conversation. There's roughly a quarter of the audience there saying without it, we're not in business. So there's a full acknowledgement that it's an extremely important part of it. But just over half, the rest of the half there is acknowledging that it's a significant impact there. So Akshat, I think that does a really good job of the setup in terms of people do have a good understanding of it, that this is a significant part of the way forward here. How do you review the results?
No, this is actually quite in line with our understanding. I'm not at all surprised. In fact, a little later into the session, we would talk about a couple of aspects of adoption across the breadth as well as in terms of the depth, and we would see that it fairly resonates with what we just saw in the quick poll. So let's just keep going, Michael. Let's get the conversation now into what is it, like we saw in the results, right? Everybody believes it's of great importance, but what is it that makes it truly important, right? So see, when you put technology to use to drive a convergence between operations and information systems, you get plenty of benefits, right? Especially in this internet era, as Michael pointed earlier. We actually put a sweet acronym on top of it. We're calling it TRACE, but essentially it's 5 key things that we believe are important. The first one is around transparency. So Industry 4.0 brings clear visibility into processes, operations, and things, which can in turn drive better planning and preparedness for a lot of different things. The second one is resilience. With Industry 4.0, we are looking at reduction of vulnerabilities of variety of different forms and shapes. In fact, that's one of the reasons why, and I'll talk about this later, it's one of the reasons why Industry 4.0 is very contextual in the current times. This also means better ability to respond to situations, even automating compliance, including tracking and tracing. All of these benefits, even the predictive maintenance aspect of things, right? All of these contribute to resilience as a key benefit. The third area that we're talking about is agility. So essentially, in a variety of different ways, Industry 4.0 implementations bring agility into the system. Having cyber and physical running in sync, this can make it easier for you to scale production up and down as and when required. It's easier to introduce newer products into the production line. Even one-off manufacturing runs, whenever required, can be, set in motion because of a lot of these technological investments that you make under this broader umbrella. The fourth one is control. Again, a fairly broad point, and there are a variety of ways in which you get more in control of your entire operation. But just to give you a couple of examples, so predictive nature of insights can bring control. We are even talking about automatic control through machine-to-machine and system-to-system connectivity without any human intervention at all, right? Lastly, we realize it's fairly motherhood, but it is really the end outcome of all that we spoke about, which is efficiency, right? Essentially, what we're talking about is producing more, producing faster, and at the same time in a safe way. If you are able to allocate the resources in a more cost-effective manner and efficiently by leveraging data that a lot of your OT systems can produce, that's a great benefit to look forward to from Industry 4.0. It also means lower downtime, better response of machinery, predictability in a lot of different, all of these contribute to better efficiency ultimately. So let's keep going, Michael. Let's talk about some of the other aspects around adoption now. I'm going to ask my colleague Mayank to come in here. Mayank, over to you for the next couple of slides.
Thanks a lot, Akshat. So it's a common belief that Industry 4.0 is to do only with the factory shop floor or manufacturing operations, as we call it. But that's not true, actually. If we look at a product value chain, starting from design and development to procurement of raw materials, then moving on to manufacturing, and eventually moving the manufactured goods through your logistics, through your warehouses, etc., eventually having sold those products, right? Industry 4.0 has its own relevance across all of these stages. The data that you see on this slide, this is essentially from a quick poll that we had run with the audience of this webinar itself. And that also revealed that most of the audience, they relate Industry 4.0 with different value chains. Of course, manufacturing being the biggest element here, but if you see the elements on the right, they are also witnessing good traction and a good relatability of Industry 4.0, so to say. The ones on the left, they are still lower in terms of the relevance currently as seen by the audience, but they are again starting to gain traction. Next, if we actually get to looking at what kind of value Industry 4.0 can drive across the value chain elements, and I'll do it through some of the examples. So if we were to look at product design and development, right, the whole phenomenon of rapid prototyping, right, the phenomenon where you don't need to really transport a physical prototype from one location to another. You could actually just transmit a digital file and the prototype could be printed at a different location, right? This is something that has become possible because of Industry 4.0 and additive manufacturing, to be very specific, as a theme within Industry 4.0. Now, when it comes to inbound logistics and procurement, again, having a traceability in your inbound logistics, that would really, feed into the manufacturing and help maintain efficiencies in the manufacturing. But that's not all. Even procurement, there can be automation in orders and fulfillment, which again, becomes possible because manufacturing is able to feed in some data to procurement, and the whole process gets optimized. Now, of course, the central theme, manufacturing operations, you set to gain efficiencies, you can enhance the worker safety on the shop floor, you can bring predictability, you can enhance the way equipment is monitored and maintained, right? So there are no unplanned breakdowns, so to say. Then on the downstream sides, again, on the logistics side, you can drive automation in your warehouses. There can be a lot of traceability, for example, for perishable goods like medical devices or medicines, right? There could be a traceability as to the temperature that is maintained throughout the supply chain. That is something that again becomes a very good value add. Then on the after sales bit, tracking your products, tracking the data generated by the products, and eventually even, feeding it back into the product design and development so that some tweaks and enhancements can be made in the product itself on the back of real world evidence. So that's essentially the kind of value Industry 4.0 is driving across the value chain. Now, if we were to talk about the kind of adoption across the world that we've seen in Industry 4.0, I'll like to invite my colleague Akshat back into the conversation to see what those numbers look like.
Yeah. So first, we so far saw the adoption in terms of the breadth, and obviously this was a fairly good spread across the value chain. We also earlier saw the quick poll results, which showcase the importance that we just did, right? If I remember right, it was about 90% of more really believing it's really important to their business in at different levels. But if you look at depth, right, let's talk about the stage of adoption or the depth to which people have gone in terms of their investments into Industry 4.0. We actually see it to be fairly encouraging as well. Especially, if you were to compare this to what the status of adoption was, say, a year or a couple more years ago, right? Right now, you see that only 14% of people are saying that they're not thinking of adopting any Industry 4.0 initiative, right? Outside of that, most of the other, it's actually fairly encouraging. Earlier, it used to be a fairly high number at this stage. Right now, it's 14%, so it's pretty good. We actually now are seeing a lot of build-up, which is concentrated towards the POC and experimentation stage. Nearly 60% people are invested into pilot projects are in the early stages of adoption. Most of these enterprises have already invested into similar projects and are now evaluating their returns, right? And value delivered before they are moving into scaled adoption in sequence, right? Additionally, there is another good news that 24% they have implemented it in parts in the organization, siloed operations, of course, but still these are to an extent larger deployments. These companies are, going forward expected to scale it up across the organizations, across geographies, in different setups that they have, across the globe, right? Most of these enterprises, when you speak to them, you realize that they are fairly positive in terms of what they have gained out of Industry 4.0 implementation so far. However, 5% of them are only at the scaled stage right now. I don't look at this as a negative. It's a progression in many ways. Where we are, the way to look at it is that 5% have already realized significant benefits and have ensured that they scale and mature their Industry 4.0 adoption pretty much across the enterprise, right? This number is definitely going to go up as some of the future years come, right? Which would actually mean a lot of different things going for the industry. We're going to cover what it means in terms of the opportunity, but perhaps a little later.
So Akshat, when you combine the quick poll with this that we did a few minutes ago live, and you combine it with this data, what you show is, hey, people have awareness, there's interest in it, and there's actual beginnings of implementation in I would say in a more of a pilot, let's get started conversation, but there's still a long ways to go.
Yeah, the way I would put this is, you're absolutely right, Michael. The way I would put this is, there is no concern over the validity of this concept, right? Everybody understands this, the importance of this, and the fact that they really need to do it, as it's a big differentiator as far as the internal operations are concerned. It's really more about strategizing towards how to do it and then executing it.
Yeah.
So Michael, let's keep going. Mike, would you like to come in here and talk about the adoption across verticals now?
Yeah. So Everest Group did an analysis of what the current Industry 4.0 adoption looks like across verticals. And I think it's a no-brainer, the results that we see here. Essentially, the heavy industries, the likes of automotive, aerospace, energy and utilities, those have been the front runners in Industry 4.0 adoption so far. And the reasons are twofold. One, the scale of their operations tend to be so, no other industries can really match that. Plus, the other side of things is essentially that these industries are the ones who've been cash crunched. There have been challenges around managing costs, etc. Right? Hence, these industries are going forward in a bigger way than some of the others in adopting Industry 4.0, exploring its value. There is another set of industries like high tech, like CPG. Again, they've also onboarded on the bandwagon, right? They are catching up with some of these heavy industries, but the kind of drivers for them tend to be slightly different, right? For them, it's more to do with accelerating the time to market for their products, maintaining that traceability across the entire process. And then the other factor that is playing out is essentially the mass customization bit. Right? I think Akshat alluded to it a bit, but how do these companies kind of go towards a hyper personalization of their products? For that, they are kind of resorting to Industry 4.0 in different shapes and forms. There also are laggards like industries, healthcare and medical devices. In these industries, the focus is still very heavy on R&D of products. They've still not got to, optimizing their processes in a big way as some of the other industries. Hence, they tend to be lagging in Industry 4.0 adoption.
Yeah, so Mayank, when I look at this, I see a natural leaning toward the left here of things that would benefit from a more of that industrialized approach. But who do you think are, there's going to be another set of winners here, I think, over the very long term. We see what Amazon has done for the retail industry, and there's a lot of dimensions to Amazon, but certainly the warehouse part of it, the industrialization of the order fulfillment and stuff like that has been incredible. But think about other winners in this industry.
Yeah. So, I think the industries that you see on the left, of course, they'll continue a sustained momentum. But I think the high-tech industries, if I were to put my money, I would put it on the high-tech industry. These companies, they tend to be cash rich, right? They are savvy with technology. The driver is also very, related to the way they drive the market. So, personalizing products or accelerating the time to market. I think high tech will soon emerge as a winner when it comes to Industry 4.0 adoption.
Yeah, if I could add here, right, I think the other industry which I see as incredibly important is that of CPG, the consumer goods industry, because that's where we are dealing with large scale production of different forms and shapes and operations which are very heavy even on logistics and both inbounds and outbounds. Right? So while the adoption is currently low, I think we're going to see a lot of uptick there. See, it's not a concern of relevance. It's extremely relevant to them. It'll be, to my point earlier, it is so much more about strategizing and execution. They don't have the wherewithal to do it all on their own. They're going to need a lot of help from the ecosystem who could orchestrate different things for them. But it is definitely very relevant to them.
Yeah, no, I have a little bet on healthcare, but in a very different way. I think some of the dimensions that you guys are talking about, healthcare could really use it on the, on the testing and the monitoring and the whole patient relationship. I think there's a wild card there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we could explore it in multiple ways. It could be about the amount of ER&D dollars that go into it, or it could be about the number of companies who go ahead and basically the volume versus value spend. I think in case of industries like healthcare, the volume could be fairly high. The value might not be as high because it is more about specific use cases which it could solve for. For companies in CPG, as an example, it perhaps is way more a value conversation. Maybe not all would move into Industry 4.0 adoption so soon, but whoever does will really be able to do it at a huge scale.
Yeah, and I think what we're all saying here is that it's going to manifest itself in different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to the flow, Mayank, back to you.
Yes, let's take the conversation forward. So a quick glimpse of where Industry 4.0 adoption stands across geographies. Again, one point that I would want to make here is typically what we've seen is North America being the front runner when it comes to a new or emerging theme, right? But that doesn't hold so true for Industry 4.0, where we are seeing the APAC geography also gearing up in a big way. And that is a factor of actually China, right? That's one factor. There's so much manufacturing located in China, and China is going big on Industry 4.0. The other factor, for not a lot of difference being across geographies is also that, the operations for enterprises tend to be so global, right? So they are kind of exploring and flirting with Industry 4.0 across the geographies, right? One more point that I want to leave the group with, it's an interesting one, and I might be bringing in a different point here, but that's of China decoupling, right? We all are aware that a lot of companies, they are exploring how they can set up alternate supply chains and manufacturing bases out of China. So in countries like Vietnam, Thailand, or India, right? Even as that happens, there would be a push towards building very modern operations, modern shop floors. So that would actually lead to a further push in APAC, kind of leading this race towards Industry 4.0. Right?
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, go ahead, Akshat. Do you have a point?
No, go ahead, please. Sorry, no, I was going to take the conversation forward into another dimension, but why did you conclude first?
Yeah. So yeah, I think with that, we kind of wrap up some insights on where the adoption stands currently. But the conversation, any conversation today is incomplete without talking about what has been the impact of COVID-19 on a theme, right? So let's switch gears on that. And Akshat, why don't you take over?
Yeah, and I think that's a fitting conclusive note on what's the adoption like, right? COVID, interestingly turned out to be a big push towards adoption of Industry 4.0. Look, COVID caused a lot of strain on pretty much all aspects of an enterprise's operations, and the industrial operations are no exception here. Industry 4.0 actually comes fairly useful in many different ways, right? The ones who adopted Industry 4.0, even to some extent prior to the onset of COVID, they were able to see a lot of benefits. So efficiency improvement through connected systems, robotics, and MES to manage tasks, so digital performance management, even AR/VR based operator assistance, which could help combat labor shortages during the lockdown, right? We saw simulation or digital twins of supply chain for running scenario planning and preparing for manufacturing and supply chain shutdowns. Even things like big data analytics and intelligent systems, which could help predict demand and address issues along the supply chain, right? All of these are very fundamental value additions, which were possible actually only for the guys who went ahead and invested. There are lots of examples of this. We know of a PPE manufacturer which used AR/VR technology for remote operator assistance. We also know of a CPG company in Asia which built a digital twin of their supply chain for scenario planning and preparing for shutdowns. And these are just a few. There are many more such examples. In summary, though, what this means is because of COVID, there is an enhanced mindshare for Industry 4.0. As I said, the early adopters were able to see a lot of benefits. They were better positioned to respond to the crisis, which has ultimately led to increased awareness for the rest of the ecosystem. The second thing is around the increased focus on emerging technologies. You would have seen some of the examples that I took. They involved these technologies like digital twins, AR/VR for remote assistance, and so on and so forth, right? So the focus on adopting these technologies, which are the key foundational enablers for Industry 4.0, that has increased significantly. And lastly, shifting enterprise priorities, right? So all of us know the whole world, because of COVID and the way in which it hit all of us, resilience has become one of the top priorities for enterprises today. And as I spoke about it earlier, resilience is one of the key value additions, key benefits that Industry 4.0 brings in. So as a result, there has been an a significant uptick rather in the first time Industry 4.0 adopters. You would see a lot of them trying to experiment now. Obviously, they're going to bring the scale upwards and move more towards larger adoption and scale over a period of time. But they're certainly experimenting and trying to see what it can do for them. If you could go to the next, I think one more thing that I wanted to say was, again, through our quick poll, what we wanted to see was what are the plans towards investing in Industry 4.0, and what is the spending plan changed per se compared to what it was last year. It's again a fairly encouraging show, right? 60% of the companies, they want to increase their spending. Majority of the enterprises have planned for increased spending on Industry 4.0, despite the fact that the economic slowdown because of the pandemic hasn't really gone away as yet. 16% of the industry respondents, they said that they might even reduce spending. They are the other side of the spectrum, but that's primarily because of lack of visibility on the returns and the inability to understand what it could do for them, and maybe partly due to the whole cash flow situation. But at a broader level, as you can see, the first two big pieces of this pie chart showcases significant increase in the dollar spend that they are planning for Industry 4.0 domain. Next slide.
Let me come in there, Akshat. So, as we saw earlier, that scale adoption stands at 5% currently for enterprises, right? Although a lot of them are exploring how they can go down that journey. And there are some challenges that enterprises face in taking up that scaled Industry 4.0 transformation, right? Again, we did a quick poll, and we asked companies to kind of let us know how much they relate with some of the challenges that we've identified here. So what you see here is limited management buy-in, so that skepticism going around large investments around Industry 4.0, and that need to showcase ROI at every stage, every milestone. That has been a big challenge in taking up scaled initiatives, right? The other one is again that a lot of POCs happen on one assembly line, for example, but how do enterprises take them to a plant level and then at an enterprise level, right? There tends to be limited thought around that, and hence a lot of these initiatives die down at the POC level itself. Right? The third one being not having clarity on what use cases would make sense for the context of an enterprise and how they want to go about taking this journey. That again tends to be a hurdle in actually realizing the value of Industry 4.0. The fourth is around data. So, there is a lot of connectivity going, your equipment is getting connected, supply chains are getting connected, right? So there's a lot of data that gets generated, but, having a sense on which of that data is actually meaningful data and what kind of analytics, what kind of modeling needs to be done on that data to actually make sense of it and then use it in the benefit of the business. Enterprises don't tend to have that clarity, and that again becomes a challenge. And the last one, but again a very important one, it's around the technological competence, right? As we'll see in a couple of minutes, to orchestrate Industry 4.2, an enterprise really needs to bring together a lot of technology, right? And not having that technological competence in-house, that becomes another challenge for them to kind of undertake this journey, right? So, having identified these challenges, we should also try to understand what enterprises should be doing that would help them alleviate some of these and realize the value of from their Industry 4.0 initiatives in an accelerated manner. And
Okay,
on that
Mayank,
note,
let's go ahead and make the pivot here. So we've been talking about the landscape and some of the context. Let's talk about that journey conversation. What are enterprises doing? And we can push on to the conversation of how do we think about the strategy and how do we get that sustained execution?
right, Michael, thanks for that. So yeah, let's change gears and see how enterprises really need to think about Industry 4.0. Right, there essentially are two prongs, as Michael touched upon. Right, you need to plan well for Industry 4.2, and then you also need to have a very strong and sustained execution approach to realize value out of these initiatives. If we deep dive on the first prong on the next page, so when you think about Industry 4.0, there are some things that you need to consider, right? There needs to be a very structured exercise around thinking about Industry 4.0 itself, right? So the first point that enterprises need to think about is the why of Industry 4.0, right? Why do I need it? What kind of value can Industry 4.0 drive for me as a particular enterprise, right? What kind of challenges can Industry 4.0 help me solve, right? Answers to those would actually be very crucial to frame the entire journey, the entire roadmap for Industry 4.0. Right? And once you have that first piece figured out, you need to assess where you are currently and where you plan to be, right? So assessing your maturity by benchmarking against some best-in-class enterprises to understand what that journey needs to be that you need to undertake, right? And once you've figured that out, eventually actually chalking out the details, the next level details around how we go about with that journey. So the third piece would be around identifying use cases, prioritizing use cases, identifying different phases of adopting Industry 4.0, identifying different milestones, what KPIs would you need to track across different phases and milestones. So having a view of all of these three, starting with a very sound view of all these three is very crucial as enterprises embark on their Industry 4.0 journey. If we move ahead, what we discovered was actually that enterprises have started realizing the value of this planning phase quite significantly. And what we estimate is that around 15% of whatever enterprises expend on Industry 4.0 today, that goes towards this planning phase, right? So, can't emphasize more on this fact that you need to start right to actually take that journey right, and these 3 steps will be very crucial for that. If you move ahead and see, once you've figured out the planning phase, what all do you need to do to ensure that the journey also goes on just fine and you're able to realize the value that you set out to realize? Akshat, why don't you come in?
Let me come in here, right? So see, folks, we so far spoke about strategizing, and I cannot emphasize enough on it. Especially given the fact that we saw that lots of newer enterprises are coming into this whole industry 4.0 implementation fold, right? So they really need that support. However, there are many others who are trying to scale now, expand, and even if they are currently at the POC stage, they really want to make it relatively larger and make it more a strategic priority than just an experiment. So let's talk execution now, right? The keyword here is sustained, and it's really about 3 key imperatives that are indispensable for successful adoption of Industry 4.0, right? What are those 3? The first one is the robust ecosystem of partners that you need to bring in. Industry 4.0 cannot be adopted alone. There are multiple entities involved, and forming a very effective ecosystem where all of these partners are able to bring in their orchestrated value together. That's really critical. The second part is the fact that Industry 4.0 is not one technology, right? You so far, for example, wouldn't have heard us talking about a single technology. It's always about multiple ones of those coming together and making the broader transformation that this phase of industrial evolution is all about. It can be brought alive only if there is an amalgamation of those technologies. Having competence in these in very limited technologies won't help you realize true value. You really need to cut across many of these. The third one, and an incredibly important one, and we speak about all of these, by the way, at length, service providers and their role is very, very critical here, right? Enterprises are struggling. It's not easy for them to make something as big as Industry 4.0 happen for them, and they really need external support. And the service provider ecosystem, fortunately, is gearing up towards that. Let's start talking about these in detail. So let's start with the ecosystem. If you could go to the next slide. See, the ecosystem for Industry 4.0 is huge, and it needs to be orchestrated, needs to be brought together. What you see on the screen are different entities in the broader ecosystem, which we believe are incredibly important. We've also laid down a certain scale in terms of their importance based on the feedback that we got. But safe to say that none of their role is not excusable. It's really, really indispensable in many ways, right? So let's start with the first one, which is IoT platform providers. So IoT, of course, plays a fundamental role in the Industry 4.0 ecosystem. It is the key to generate data from physical devices, which in many ways is foundational to anything that you want to do in Industry 4.0. This data that we are talking about needs to be integrated across different processes, plants, locations, and this data forms the basis for interaction between the physical and digital systems. So IoT platforms basically provide the integrated software capabilities that connect systems and software applications and help in exchange and analysis of this data. There are lots of companies here, PTCs and Siemens and Gs of the world. They are some examples of companies who are providing such platforms. The second one is industrial automation system vendors. These are all the companies who have been in the broader industrial technology ecosystem for a while. They provide your typical PLCs, MES, SCADA systems across the broader manufacturing pyramid. They have now evolved their offerings to enhance intelligence and functionalities, which help enable smarter manufacturing and vertical and horizontal integration of systems cutting across layers. This is key to Industry 4.0, as you can imagine. The third is the supporting technologies and systems providers. There are lots of supporting technology and systems which are required for Industry 4.0, such as connectivity hardware, security systems, additive manufacturing systems, robot technology, drones, machine connectivity systems. And given that there is a very wide variety of these technology and systems, we are also talking about a host of different vendors. As an example, Dell provides rugged server storage solutions. Autodesk provides additive manufacturing solutions, simulation systems, right? All of these companies provide all of these technologies which are then required to make Industry 4.0 happen. The next and very interesting category is that of cloud vendors. They offer hosting services to the end consumers, the manufacturing end consumers. They also, by the way, partner with industrial automation players to develop and host mission critical SCADA and MES applications. They are fairly unique actually, given the fact that they also provide IoT platforms, which are very tightly coupled with cloud infra on one side and the Industry 4.0 solutions on the other. The next ecosystem entity that I'll speak about is of chips and sensor vendors. Look, sensorization is fundamental, right? We spoke about the IoT platform providers in the IoT context, but in the IoT context, again, sensors are fairly important. So the companies who are in the business of providing sensors of variety of different forms and shapes, which basically help in digitization of manufacturing environments, they are key. The other side is chip companies. So all of these companies who are developing now high performance AI-enabled chips, again, for a variety of different use cases, robotics, drones, connected machines, they are also providing their own value. Lastly, the startups and niche players, right? It's easy to ignore them, but they actually are bringing great value. If you look at them, they have developed strong offerings, which cut across niche areas and enabling technologies for Industry 4.0. There are lots of names here. I can give a few. Uptick, for example, provides industrial analytics solutions. Clarity provides industrial cybersecurity solutions. Evon, connectivity hardware. Shapeways, another player which provides 3D printing related marketplaces and services. Blue Yonder is another company which has developed comprehensive predictive analytics methods which enable automated decision making, right? So it's a whole ecosystem of different solutions which actually sit on top of your broader platform and make those specific use cases possible, right? This ecosystem essentially needs to be all orchestrated together, either directly or, like I pointed earlier, through a third party who has the ability to kind of bring it all together for an enterprise.
So Akshat, let's move from the supplier world to the talent world. And let's talk about the skills in the organization that are going to be critical, because I think ultimately it's great to have all the technology and the supply chain, but ultimately it's going to come down to how does your specific company and your industry adopt, and that comes down to talent.
Sure. So if you look at this slide, and Mayank, feel free to chime in here, but if you look at this whole world of talent, right, it's an incredibly interesting one, right? So we spoke about the fact that you need to bring in a lot of those players together. At the same time, you also need to bring in a lot of technologies together. What you see on your slide, on this slide, is a comparison between the level of relative adoption of those technologies, and at the same time, the availability of talent, right? Interestingly, you would see that there are some technologies which have been adopted better than some of the others. So analytics in cloud, for example, right? They are on relatively higher in terms of availability. So is IoT, but there are many others where the talent is not as readily available, right? So enterprises need to focus on finding some of this talent, right? And there are lots of areas to think about: cybersecurity, privacy, even robotics, right? While robotics has been utilized in industrial setups for years, skills need to be developed in emerging areas such as cobots and automated guided vehicles. So essentially what we're saying is talent is not going to be easy here. These technologies do not come natively to enterprises. Hence, having the right talent in-house is difficult. Talent scarcity exists for most of the key technologies that we are talking about. In effect, what this means is your talent strategy is going to be very important as an enterprise. Finding the talent, training the talent, even retraining from the talent that you might have internally is going to be fairly critical if you are able to achieve the level of technological competence we are talking about. I think the only one thing which is even more important than finding and training and retaining the talent is going to be talent retention, because this talent is exceptionally scarce, and the resources jump ship like anything, right? People are throwing crazy money at them, and it's very hard to make them stick. If you keep going, Michael. Yeah. So if you take this further, right? So see, in total, there are lots of challenges that your enterprises are looking at Industry 4.0 adoption are facing, right? Right from talent availability and skill sets, which I already spoke about, there are other bigger challenges as well. So organizational complexity and change is another big one. They're not able to, it's such a huge, massive transformation that being able to do Industry 4.0 at that kind of a scale without external help and without guidance, it's incredibly difficult. There are complex org structures, different level of digital maturities. In fact, in many of these companies, you're talking about acquisitions that have happened, right? One part of that company now has a very different maturity on technology than the other. Integration and monetization of data is exceptionally tricky, right? Over a period of time, different parts of an organization invest in different forms of technology, meaning that their data, their technological maturity is fairly different. And bringing it all together, which is the key for Industry 4.0 success, that's fairly tricky. Lastly, the speed of implementation, and this is where perhaps the biggest challenge is. People expect this to happen soon, which is generally not the case for anyone, right? So being able to implement it at scale quickly, and then even start realizing ROI from the money that is being pumped in, that's tricky, right? And that's where perhaps all of it, points us to the relevance and the third prong of the execution that we spoke about, which is service providers. If you could keep going, Michael. The next one is all about the services ecosystem, right? See, as I spoke about it, enterprises are looking for external help. It's not something that they can do on their own. And what that means is service providers are looking at a bunch of different opportunities. It cuts across a value chain from on one side, consulting them on a variety of different aspects that Mayank spoke about earlier, then to development and verification and validation, which is all about helping them develop the right solutions, testing them, and ensuring them that they're validated. Then deployment and system integration, which is about actually implementing those systems. And then lastly, managing those systems, providing services and supporting them over a period of time. All of these are very fairly important areas. Service providers have a bunch of offerings for all of this. We see them building great capabilities to support this, right? Before we go into some of those details, the one thing I want to mention is the fact that if you are a service provider in this market, each one of these categories is very, very important. As an example, it's very easy to overlook consulting and design and say that we don't do that. But trust me, many of your customers need that today. In fact, there's a reason why nearly 10 to 50 double digits share of consulting in this kind of a value chain is generally unheard of. Right? But that's the stage of adoption right now. It's very important. In fact, if you do consulting well, it actually means a lot of flow through business for you going forward as well. Anyways, let's keep going, Michael. We do realize it's we are in the last part of this. Mayank, why don't you come in here and speak about some of the sourcing considerations?
Sure. Thanks, Akshat. So, if we explore what an enterprise looks for when they are out there selecting a service provider, right? There are a lot of crucial parameters, but we've highlighted the top ones here, right? And the one that's most crucial, again, a no-brainer, it's the competence in next generation technologies, because these technologies are so scarce, and Industry 4.0 in the end has to be an amalgamation of multiple technologies. Service providers really need to orchestrate that, and that's a very crucial parameters that enterprises kind of evaluate via POCs, via investments of service providers in these teams to kind of gauge, the ability there, right? Again, ecosystem orchestration, or the kind of partners, the partner ecosystem that Akshat laid out earlier, right? How well is a service provider orchestrating that whole ecosystem? It also becomes a very crucial parameter for enterprises. Scale and global delivery presence. Again, given that Industry 4.0, when enterprises resort to scaled initiatives, that's when typically they would tap into the services ecosystem. So whether a service provider can support them across the globe, across their manufacturing sites, etc., right? That becomes a crucial consideration. And then whether they can partner across the journey, right? From defining the roadmap for Industry 4.0 to actually implementing platforms, sensorizing equipment, to pulling that data and helping them make sense out of it, right? Can a service provider partner on the entire journey? That also becomes very crucial. Moving on.
All right, so
So
let me jump in here, Mac. What we wanted to do is also give the audience an opportunity to get a slice of our data, if you will, get an opportunity to see some of the specifics for the industry elements that we're showing there on the screen here. So what we're going to do is open this up. If you're interested in getting a conversation with Mayank and Akshat around two of these dimensions here, go ahead and click the screen there, and we'll be in touch and have that conversation on one of or a couple of these elements here. So I'm not going to read these to you, but certainly you can look at those things that might be most relevant to your organization. We have a representative sample of the service providers in the ecosystem that we would be talking about, and we'll leave it open for another 3 or 4 seconds here. And if you're interested, click the link. Okay, very good. All right, so what we're going to do is we're about ready to go in the to the Q&A aspect of this. We've got several questions here that I think we can answer on the live chat. Some of these we'll have to get to otherwise, but I will first of all, I wanted to give Akshat a chance to talk just in a minute or so here. Akshat, how do you help your clients?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So to the people on the call, look, so we are an analyst and advisory organization, as you know, right? So within this broader focus area of engineering services, we serve 2 sets of clients, right? One is enterprises. So if you're an enterprise looking for any kinds of services around engineering services sourcing, whether it's on the broader vendor strategy, on locations, the kind of talent you're looking for, understanding what some of your other peers are doing, or even how your GEC story needs to evolve. All of these are aspects where we help enterprises in their broader engineering sourcing ecosystem, right? And just to be on the same page, engineering is all about products, the commercial offerings that you're taking to your customers. On the other side, we also serve service providers. So service providers who are in the business of providing engineering services to their clients across a variety of different verticals. We offer support in building the right strategy to address the right growth opportunities. We help you differentiate better in terms of equipping you with the right kind of thought leadership and in a variety of different ways as well. And lastly, even in terms of growth, in terms of helping you do your business more and better, I think those are some of the offerings that we bring to the table. We are a membership first organization. We bring a lot of value through our memberships, which give you access to all of our research that we do day in, day out in this ecosystem, and also give you access to analysts like ourselves who are available at a click for any kind of support and information that you're looking for. That's just a quick overview of our practice. Michael, back to you.
Yeah, so I've got several questions here. The first one I want to ask you guys is, while automotive is leading in Industry 4.0 adoption, which is largely known, but can you clarify how high-tech and industrial verticals are lagging behind energy and utilities? Being energies and utilities is very asset intensive and site operational. Please clarify where Industry 4.0 largely applied in, I guess this would be in ERU. Is it towards increased automation and robotics?
I can take that up. So yeah, it's essentially in the operations for the energy and utilities companies, right? So for utilities, how to make the power grids smart, right? Gathering data from the grids and basically garnering actionable insights out of them. For energy companies, an example that comes to mind is automating the monitoring of pipelines, for example, using drone technology, AR, VR, etc., so that the manual intervention at adverse locations that can be minimized, right? And again, given the scale of operations that these companies tend to have, they are ahead of some of the companies in the high-tech space as of now. But yeah, going forward, potentially high-tech would overtake.
Hey, Mayank, I would invite you to have some of your friends come to Texas. When our grid went down a month or so ago, it felt like we were back into being a third world country. So send some of your automation and your industrial 4.0 to Texas.
The only problem with that, Michael, is that even the sensors wouldn't work without electricity.
Yeah. All right. Here's another question here. How are traditional technology providers changing the shape changing the shape of their organization to meet the demands of Industry 4.0?
Let me take that, right? I honestly don't know what is the meaning of the word shape here, but I can perhaps broadly talk about the tech vendors. Again, tech vendors is a broad word. I wish there was a way to clarify what it means. But if you're generally talking about the technology ecosystem was providing the right platforms and tools to serve the need for technology, I think it's safe to say that they are proactively building platforms. They are building IIoT platforms as at the foundational layer. They are partnering with a lot of other entities in the ecosystem. A good classic case here is, say, those of cloud vendors, right? So they provide the infrastructure on one side, and on the other side, they are actually acting as the orchestrator of multiple other solutions that are required on top of those platforms. So if you were to look for an AWS Industry 4.0 or IIoT platform, what you get at the same point is also a whole host of solutions which serve those specific use cases. So at a broader level, you see them investing in platforms. You see them investing in domain which is required to make those platforms come alive. You're also going to see them investing in a lot of partners who bring in solutions. And you're also going to see them investing in partners who are bringing in services competence, who can, of course, provide that service, but can also maybe become a funnel of potential business as well.
All right, here, one last question. This may be a really short answer, depending on whether you guys have a good view of this, but where do you see blockchain smart contracts on Industry 4.0?
Yeah, I can take that. So essentially on the supply chain side, right, managing vendors, that's where blockchain would come in. But I would also put in a caveat that it's not as big as one would expect at this point, at least, right? We are seeing some evidence of blockchain being used for smart contracts between an enterprise and its suppliers, right? But not a very big theme under the umbrella of Industry 4.0.
Okay, so we're still really a niche play then at that point. Okay, all right. We have a bunch of other questions we're not going to have time for. I wanted to thank our audience. I wanted to thank Akshat and Mayank for their participation today. We will try to get back and answer all the questions that were presented to us in a one-to-one session. We will answer those that chose to get a slice of our data. We'll be back with you on those. And with that, I wanted to also show you on the next slide here a place where we can get more related content. There's a lot of it up on our website. Happy to point you in that direction as well. And thank you for your time.